That was like, I go.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. It's really lovely to see the amount of response this process is getting at this very early stage. My name is Dr. Rebecca Lisi. I am the Deputy Town Manager for East Long Meadow. Welcome. We're going to begin the formal meeting in a minute, but I just want to say that the Manager's Office has convened this steering committee to help guide us in the process. And a few things I'll say about the process is that it is going to be a highly iterative process, which means we're going to learn, and then we'll imagine and create opportunities and options out of what we're learning. And then we'll turn those ideas over to PVPC to help us create concrete plans and options. And then we'll review those plans and options, and we'll modify, and we'll engage the public in a very deep and meaningful way, at least twice through this process. After tonight's meeting, we have another meeting on May 20th, which is going to be more like a community charrette, where you're going to be involved in the planning process and creating those opportunities and options that you'd like for the town to consider. And then on May 8th, we have an informal ice cream social that is a Meet the Steering Committee event. That ice cream social is held from 4 to 6 p.m. at Graham Central Station, and it'll just be a chance to, again, informally connect with the steering committee members and get to know them better. I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce the steering committee members. We have Nicole Polite. Our chair, Carolyn Farros, is in delay. We have Jason Gumpert, Steve Graham, Don Starks, and our two ex officio members are Planning Board member Rob Terrell and our Town Council President, Ralph Page. Welcome.
Thank you, Rebecca. So we will call this meeting to order of the Centertown District Steering Committee. We'll start by calling the roll. Nicole Polite.
Here.
Don Stark.
Here.
Stephen Graham.
Here.
Ralph Page.
Here.
Rob Terrell.
Here.
And Jason Gumpert here. Carolyn Farros, I guess, is not here. We will start with new business. Should I have the clerk read the business? Do you want to read the first order of business?
Oh, okay, sure. New business, a educational forum facilitated by Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. I'll go through the whole part and then turn it over.
Should we read them all out?
Yeah, sure. Where is East Long Meadow today? Number 2, what is smart growth?
They can't hear you in the audience.
Oh. New business, A, educational forum facilitated by Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. Number 1, where is East Long Meadow today? Number 2, what is smart growth? Number 3, how the 40R process achieves smart growth goals. B will be a mapping exercise for the Centertown district delineation. C is planning for public engagement at the May 20th event. And D is closing remarks and questions. And that is it for new business, which we start with.
So we'll start with A. And I think we want to welcome our guest from Pioneer Valley Planning Commission for that.
Thank you. Good evening, steering committee members and members of the community.
Yeah.
My name is.
Yeah, there's no mic, so they
oh, this isn't. Okay.
No, they're not hearing it.
Right. Sorry about that. Good evening. My name is Kyle Fennell. I'm a senior planner with the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission.
And my name is Aiden Heming McMahon, and I'm a planner with the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission as well.
So this evening, we're going to provide a little bit of an overview of Town Center District Planning Project for those of you who are new to this topic. We're also going to be exploring a little bit of where East Long Meadow is today. We'll get into some of the details of smart growth broadly, and then we'll also elaborate on the 40R process and smart growth. So some context for the project. The Centertown District Planning Project is a timely product of recent townwide planning. This is really coming out of the 2021 Resilient Master Plan, which identified and stressed the importance of creating a more defined town center, improving walkability downtown, building the town center as an economic driver for the community, and diversifying available housing stock. There's some ongoing projects like the high school building project and also the housing needs assessment, which are examples of current efforts to identify and address current and future needs for the East Longmeadow. And since a successful master planning recently completed and you have these exciting long-term projects underway, Towns is poised to achieve its goal for a center town district planning. So the project goal primarily is to craft a center town district bylaw that follows smart growth principles to guide future development of a community core. To achieve this, residents, town officials joining the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission to define smart growth, what it looks like in East Longmeadow. So the project team, myself, Aiden, and Ken Comia from the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission will be supporting this project. We're working with this wonderful steering committee of community volunteers, joined by representatives from the planning board and town council, and convened and facilitated by Deputy Town Manager Rebecca Lisi. I think Tom's floating around somewhere. Usually, there he is. Project timeline, we are in April already. This project is scheduled to conclude by the end of the calendar year. So we're in the first phase where we're examining existing land use and reviewing a draft Centertown bylaw that was created, I believe, last calendar year, 2023. Coming up in May, we will have our first public engagement event. Over the summer months, we in the Pioneer Valley will be refining and drafting a bylaw based on that first round of engagement and with support from the steering committee. We will be bringing that back in late summer, early fall for a second public engagement event. And then going into the winter months, we'll be crafting that final bylaw language to take forward to planning board and eventually to town council. So if we think about the 40R process, and we'll elaborate on what 40R means, but it does include some extra steps because we'll be working with the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. So this springtime, we'll have a pre-application meeting with EOHLC. Aiden and I met with members of the Executive Office just last week to go over a few details, so we are on their radar. The public engagement event in May is part of the application process. We're required to have 2 events. We will be completing sections of the smart growth application in the summer months. We'll have the second engagement event in the fall, again, part of the 40R application requirements. And then after that, once the second public hearing is held, we will be able to submit a complete application to the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities in order to get a letter of eligibility, which says that they've reviewed the application, that the community has checked all the boxes, and then we can submit proof of adoption of the bylaw if that's what the community chooses to do. And then that will conclude the process with EOHLC. They'll send a final letter. The steering committee has a role to play within this process. Tonight, we'll be starting with determining characteristics of what a town center district would look like. Part of the application requires a lot of analysis at the parcel level, projecting what a change in zoning density would result in terms of future development. And really, before we can do that type of work, we're coming to the steering committee to help delineate where they would like the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission to start doing some of that analysis. So that's what the mapping activity will be focusing on later after this presentation. Throughout the process, the steering committee will be supporting us with community engagement and really helping the community's perspective come into the language of the bylaw. And then once we get to the end of the application process, the steering committee will be supporting that and advocating for adoption. So where is East Longmeadow today? East Longmeadow is, I think, strongly positioned following many years of long-range planning. Really starting in 2019, there were two big planning events, updating the open space and recreation plan, and also starting with a municipal vulnerability preparedness plan. The big one, though, is the resilient master plan from 2021. There's a lot of this project specifically comes from that endeavor. Currently, we are wrapping up on a housing needs assessment. Pioneer Valley Planning Commission is conducting that work for the town. And then we're also in the middle of this center town zoning process. There has been some amendments to the zoning bylaw and some considered amendments. Most recently, mixed use village zoning was adopted in 2019. And there was a draft center town zoning district, I think, from last calendar year. But like I said, the Resilient Master Plan is really the starting point for this effort. The document and community members who participated back in 2021, I think some of you are in the room. Thank you for continuing your efforts. But at that time, the community envisioned the future of East Longmeadow as a vibrant future, one in which we value and include all members of your community, plan for managed and sustainable growth, and cultivate the town's identity as a charming, welcoming, and safe place to call home. So this was in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, with over 300 residents contributing to a community survey, 60 residents helping craft that visioning statement, repeated focus groups, 4 different focus groups, 2 different rounds of student engagement, which produced over 255 recommendations and priorities, some really good ones I was reading, and then an implementation workshop with 20 residents to advance the work. So from there, 5 main themes came out with several strategies, and we really want to focus on the theme of the center square, because that seems to be the physical geographic center of the community. And this project is looking at how do we help define that area and create a vibrant and exciting place to visit for residents and for guests of the community. So for Center Square specifically, strategies included keeping on top of any crash data and advancing safety in the area, considering adopting a town center overlay district using the mixed use village district bylaw as a guide. That's kind of what led us to this point. Pursuing safety and traffic improvements, studying alternatives to the center turn lane, improve the streetscape within the right-of-way to allow safer vehicular and pedestrian access, begin mapping cultural assets, complete feasibility study for public safety, improve conditions and accessibility of sidewalks and crosswalks throughout the town center, and consider expanding the rail trail both north and south. So all that feeds into some of our work. And most recently, we've conducted some analysis and looked at the most recent data regarding the needs for housing in the community. There were additional strategies from the Resilient Master Plan that spoke about supporting mixed-use housing development, creating a plan for affordable housing, creating a housing production plan, and also exploring benefits of an accessory apartment or in-law zoning bylaw. So part of the housing production plan process is to conduct a housing needs assessment. The town has contracted with Pioneer Valley Planning Commission to do that work. They're actually awarded a grant to do that work this year, and that's ongoing. And so we have some data from that initial assessment to share. Currently, a significant portion of residents in East Longmeadow are what we would call housing cost burdened. That means that households are spending more than 30% of their monthly income on housing expenses. For renters, that is rent, utilities, renters insurance. For homeowners, that's mortgage, property taxes, utility bills. Households which spend over 50% of their income on housing related costs are considered severely cost burdened. So we have a graph here that shows both renters on the top bar and owned units with a mortgage on the bottom bar. It shows that 50% of renters are cost burdened with 27% severely cost burdened. So 1 in 4 renters are spending 50% of their monthly income on housing. Of the homeowners with mortgages, almost 30% are cost burdened in some way, spending 30% or more on their housing needs. We start to look at what is available in terms of housing, what the stock and the age of the stock looks like. 85% in that graph on the left is 1 unit detached housing. The vast majority is a single family home or a single unit dwelling. And if we look on the right graph shows housing units constructed by decade, starting pre-1940 on the left and then working up by decades. We'll see that the smallest percent of production per decade has been in the last 2010 to 2022 by these numbers. And that is despite a consistently increasing population. So that just kind of provides a little context to what current residents are struggling with in terms of housing. Now, celebrated in the Resilient Master Plan is the recent mixed-use village district bylaw, an amendment to the zoning bylaw from 2019. It was celebrated because the intention of the bylaw is to allow and promote a mix of uses, including residential, commercial, and business. Hopefully creating a diversity of residential units, not just including single family detached, but also allowing for townhomes, multifamily or mixed use residential where commercial or business is on the ground floor and residential is above. This particular bylaw, however, comes with some pretty strict limitations. Limiting or requiring a minimum of 40 acres for a parcel to be classified as mixed-use village. It has a maximum density of 12 units per acre, and it has strict and narrow requirements for floor space. Essentially no less Then 20% can be dedicated for commercial, but no more than 30%. So it's a very specific window of the floor space that can actually be used for business or commercial use. So with that strict language, the mixed use village bylaw really only applies to one parcel. Street address is 330 Chestnut. It's just at 40.35 acres. And it's about a mile away from town center. So it's not walkable, easily walkable. And if this type of development would be intended to be similar to what we picture as town center, we may want to think about drawing those boundaries to include that parcel. That's just for your consideration.
All right. Hi, everyone. So I'm going to shift gears slightly here just to kind of elaborate a little bit more on what we are talking about when we talk about the concept of smart growth. Because, it's a fairly nebulous concept in a sense, but at the same time, I think that a lot of folks have a pretty immediate idea of what it might mean when they think about the term. So I guess the first thing to note is that it isn't a single tool or idea, it's a collection of those ideas, which is fundamentally intended to increase, I guess you could say, the sense of community within a space through providing a diversity of things like housing options to meet folks at different stages of their lives and be accessible to them at those stages, a diversity of transportation and transit options to encourage things like walkability, to encourage things like small-scale commercial uses mixed with residential, thinking along the lines of like cafes and restaurants, that sort of thing, creating a sort of community hub in the center of town. So what does smart growth look like in Massachusetts and Connecticut and New England and just in general, right? We have some examples here, but in general, the idea is that these downtown areas are pedestrian friendly. They provide a multitude of different transportation options. They tend to be a little higher density and have a mixture of uses. They provide strong economic opportunity for businesses that want to come into the town, and they also provide potentially job opportunities for folks who are living in the town. And they essentially create a place that feels alive with activity at different times of the day through the mixture of residential, commercial uses, et cetera. So what are some of the benefits of smart growth? Infill development and redevelopment, increased density of development, and the adaptive reuse of existing buildings can result in the more efficient utilization of land resources, more compact urban areas, and more efficient delivery of quality public services. Mixed-use developments include quality housing, varied by type and price, integrated with shopping, schools, community facilities, and jobs. They provide a sense of place, resulting from the design and development that is usually instantiated through the bylaws and review of development projects as they come in, to protect and incorporate a distinctive character for the community in its unique context. And it's focused on integrating land use and transportation planning to accommodate more than just the automobile, but including the automobile as well, of course, and providing different transportation choices like mass transit, biking, walking, and being pedestrian friendly and focusing on the human scale when it comes to development. So this is just to begin touching on what 40R in the context of smart growth, and later on I'm going to get into that in more detail as regarding what 40R is. But just to start off, Massachusetts General Law Chapter 40R, entitled Smart Growth Zoning and Housing Production, states that its purpose is to encourage smart growth and encourage housing production in Massachusetts. And to do so, it aims to promote smart growth through 9 sort of goals, overarching goals. These are increasing the available housing by creating a range of housing opportunities, emphasizing a mixture of land uses, taking advantage of compact design, fostering distinctive and attractive communities, preserving open space, farmland, natural beauty, and critical environmental areas, strengthening the existing communities, providing a variety of transportation choices, making development decisions predictable, fair, and cost-effective, and encouraging community and stakeholder collaboration in development decisions. So 40R has been popular in the Pioneer Valley region and in other areas of the state. So it was established in 2004, and it encourages municipalities to zone for dense or smart growth. And one key factor of 40R is that these communities, as they enact 40R, they are paid by the state or incentivized through funding by the state for zoning and permitting what the state approves as being compact, affordable, mixed-use development in specific locations. And I'm going to get into what that means a little bit more in a second here. And as of May 2019, which is a little while ago, but this is the latest data that we have at the moment, 51 districts have been fully approved in 42 municipalities. So 40R in the Pioneer Valley, just really quickly, these are what the numbers look like. There is a lot of variety in terms of the ongoing success of these areas. Some have been highly successful, some a little less so far, but something to consider when looking at these numbers is that development tends to take a long time. So it's a process. But these are just some of the numbers for your consideration. Also, one thing to note that we really want to make sure that we get across here is that a smart growth district is defined as an overlay district, which means that it goes on top of, so to speak, the underlying zoning district. And what this actually means is that within a smart growth district, if a developer wanted to develop on a parcel within that district, they could choose to abide by the smart growth standards, the overlay district standards, or the underlying standards. So if they were commercial, if there are certain standards that are specific to a commercially zoned parcel, they could sort of have a conversation with the community regarding which avenue they want to take to meet their goals and the community's goals. So just want to make sure that that's clear. It doesn't override the underlying zoning. It's supposed to sort of act in accordance with it. Additionally, just another thing that we want to note here is that one of the chief intentions behind 40R and smart growth in general is to spur both mixed-use commercial and business development, but also and additionally accessible and diverse housing options. And something we want to note here, and that this graphic sort of gets across, is that there is a large variety of potential residential development that, again, meets people at various stages of their life in terms of its accessibility, its affordability, etc. Its proximity to services. So there's a whole range of what's commonly referred to as missing middle housing, which just means it's housing that you don't typically see in a lot of American communities. You typically see single family detached housing, and then you might see, denser apartments. But there's this whole range in the middle. And part of this process would be to try to identify ways to make sure that that kind of housing can be created. So this is just a little background on the affordability component of 40R. So 40R does have as one of its requirements that 20% of the housing development be affordable to residents who make 80% of the area median income for the region or less. And so that's what those numbers look like in East Longmeadow. And this is taken from HUD's data for the Springfield metro area for 2024. So another thing to just consider. So for one person, it would be about approximately $61,000 with a rent at about $1,500. Little about that, but approximately. And then just another thing to note, to keep in the back of your minds as we go forward here, is that one of the another really important goal behind 40R and smart growth bylaws generally is that it has some fairly stringent, often design standards to make sure that the aesthetics of the community are being considered in all development. So things that can be considered in a 40R smart growth bylaw include buildings, streets and sidewalks, infrastructure, buildings and garages, off-street parking, natural site features, on-site open spaces, landscaping, exterior signage, buffering relative to adjacent properties, and there are other, additional more granular things, of course, as well. but those design standards simply, they can't create what are considered unreasonable requirements by the state that reduce the ability to create as of right smart growth development. So that's sort of a something that would need to be, discussed and ironed out with the state in this process. But just to say, development standards are highly encouraged as part of this. So now to get into a few going to highlight both the benefits and the requirements of 40R in a couple of slides. So as I mentioned earlier, there are some direct financial incentives that are provided by the state upon approval of a 40R district. So it's based on the projected housing units that are part of that district, which would be part of some of the analysis that we would be doing, is trying to define what those numbers look like. But there's an initial state incentive payment between 10K and 600K. And again, that's related to the projected housing units in the table there. There's an additional $3,000 provided for each housing unit as it's built out. And there's also some additional funding that the state can provide for school-age children who move into a 40R development. So the requirements of 40R here, as I mentioned, 20% of the housing must be affordable. And again, that's at the 80% AMI level. So the numbers that you saw earlier. There are some minimum density requirements that are based on the type of housing that's being produced. The housing can't have age restrictions. It must be open to everybody. And it has to be in what's considered an eligible location, which in this case would be the second option of three, which is area of concentrated development, essentially being a town center would basically qualify as being an area of concentrated development. So that is in our sort of preliminary research here, that is what we've been focusing on. Just looking at what the land uses are in a 1 mile buffer around the Rotary. This was presented in our previous presentation, but really is just designed to kind of remind folks and get people who weren't able to attend that last meeting up to speed. This is just a breakdown of the uses in that 1 mile radius. As you can see, 58% is devoted to residential use, and that's overwhelmingly single-family residential use. After that, the highest percentage is actually underdeveloped or vacant land, which is potentially an exciting thing if we're thinking in the context of doing this, because it could allow for a transition toward uses that are more in line with what's typically considered to be downtown uses, preferable downtown uses. Also just want to, so this is again really just highlighting the residential, the fact that there's so much that is residentially devoted. And also, as I mentioned, the underdeveloped or vacant, but additionally, there's a lot of land that is currently classified as industrial development. And some of that could transition toward other uses like commercial, residential, business uses that are more in line, again, with what are typically considered to be ideal uses for smart growth in a downtown area.
So at this point, we've gone through a lot of information and we appreciate everybody's patience there. We would like to field any questions that the steering committee or the audience may have regarding smart growth broadly as a concept and practice, and then perhaps details about Mass General Law 40R. We should probably start with the steering committee. Any questions?
I know we have industrial zoning basically in the center of town due to past use of the railroad. And I know this is an overlay district. Would that mean we should change the zoning first? How would that work? Because if it remains industrial, it's probably not the most productive use of the land.
Mm-hmm.
Can you show the map again and repeat the question so that the audience can hear?
Yeah, so the question was regarding the fact that there are parcels in the downtown area that are zoned for industrial use. This is showing land use, which is a little bit different than the zoning. So the zoning is what's allowed, right? And then the land use is what exists. So that's the distinction here. But there are parcels that are zoned for industrial use. And the question was whether or not the town should consider changing that zoning, the underlying zoning for industrial, before going ahead with 40R or smart growth overlay district. Yeah. So that's a great question. I think, that would be sort of an additional question, an additional consideration kind of beyond this, but it does make sense to do that if that's what the town would like to do. But that would be sort of a little bit separate from this process, I would say, because this is focused on the overlay district. Kyle, do you have anything you'd add to that?
Yeah, I don't think we would have a strong guidance opinion for this group. I think it is something that the planning board would need to seriously consider. If the steering committee would like to promote the 40R path to creating this bylaw, just keeping in mind that this is an overlay district and there are implications.
Any other committee members?
Jason? George, online with a question.
Oh. Hi, George. You want to ask your question?
Good evening. Yeah. First of all, as someone who's been involved with center planning and multi-use development all the way back to enhancing East Long Meadow, I congratulate you on pursuing this. It's been a long, long journey. Secondly, this was promoted as reinvigorating East Long Meadow's historic center. I'm currently on the Historic Commission. That's a disclaimer. But I have heard no mention of the historic assets that we have within this overlay district. And I'm not just talking about the major assets such as the Congo Church, Town Hall, the fire station, and the cemeteries, but many of the individual single-family houses on Prospect Street, Somers Road, Pleasant Street, Elm Street, Maple Street are historic. They're on the Macris inventory. Most of them are over 100 years old. Many of them are 19th century. And I'd like to see something that we've been talking about on the Historic Commission about doing a historic district. Is there some way that we can combine bringing in the 40R approach with preserving this history of East Long Meadow? I mean, if you walk down Maple Street, the south side is all new. The north side is all 19th and early 20th century. I'd hate to see all of that torn down and turn into townhouses. So how do we integrate the two approaches? I don't know, but it's a thought going forward. Thank you for your time.
Carolyn, with the chair's permission, can I make a comment?
Yes.
So I just wanted to make a comment that I think that historic preservation is in line with 40R mixed use infill development, and that in any sort of mixed use district, when we're using smart growth, we're looking to fill in the empty spaces, and the priority is to use the infrastructure that's in place as opposed to tearing something down and building something new. So really utilizing and highlighting the fact that we do have this historic architecture downtown.
What empty spaces do we have?
I think there's a lot of empty space. If you look at the map again, the gray areas.
In between houses that are already there, use that space.
Can you highlight the underdeveloped or vacant?
Yeah, that is actually, that's the underdeveloped or vacant is the white on that map. So those are parcels that are classified as underdeveloped or vacant by the assessor's office as of this year. So those are not single family homes or anything like that. They're vacant parcels.
Yeah, wetland.
No, they are not wetlands. Actually, those would be under conservation, which would be a separate. So those would be conservation, the green.
So Carolyn, may I? With regard to the projected units and the built out units under the 40R programs in some of these other towns, is there a time limit that the state gives a town to complete projected, or is there a penalty if they don't complete the projected?
I'm going to have to ask everybody to be quiet so they can hear the questions that are being asked. So there will be time for questions from the audience. Thank you.
Right. So the question is, for the communities that go through 40R, is there a time limit in terms of completing those projected units? To my understanding, there is not a time limit. There are many examples of communities who have 40R districts on the books and have not built a single unit in those districts. There is also the potential that if a district were to eventually produce more units than they initially projected, the state would pay the difference from the initial payment to what they eventually build out.
And is the payment based on actual units built out or projected units?
So it's that initial payment is for the projection. So that's the incentive to go through the process. And then it's an additional $3,000 when every permit gets approved to build.
Got it.
Ralph, you had something?
I did. Thank you. I couldn't just sit here. I'm sorry. So a couple questions. One, our bylaw strictly states, and we've actually just used the exact wording, that we're trying to remove congestion from the center of town, especially traffic congestion. We just had a facility come in, and one of the reasons for denying it was the fact that there'd be added congestion because of possible added traffic coming through. How do we alleviate that when we're looking to double or triple the amount of units within a town? I was looking at the single family residential requirements, and they were talking about at least 8 per acre was the requirement, which is about 5,000 square foot maximum per unit, 43,560 divided by 8. Right now in our residential C, we require 10,000 square feet, which would be 4. So we would be more than doubling it. And I just want to know how that's going to relate to congestion. And the second thing, so that's the first part. The second question would be, as a steering committee, wouldn't we look towards doing a center district? And then if we choose to do a 40R overlay over it, wouldn't that be the better way to go? Create the district. Within the district, possibly remove your industrial because we didn't want that in the center. Set standards. And then if we want to look towards the 40R smart growth, at that point, then do it. I tend to think maybe we're jumping ahead without even knowing where we're talking about. But those are just my thoughts. Thank you.
Do you want to respond to that, or do you?
Wasn't it really a question? No, I didn't know if you want to respond.
The first part, as far as the congestion, and
in terms of congestion, I think it's
driven through the rotary. So.
I avoid it, honestly. I think that's where the delineation of the boundaries is key, and considering existing infrastructure and the broader community goals is going to be significant consideration for the steering committee. That's the best I can offer at this point for your first comment. For the second comment regarding a village center or town center district zone, that would address the variety of zoning uses that are permitted in town center currently. That is an acceptable approach from the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. They are quick to approve a 40R district on an existing town center zoning district. So you could craft the language in the bylaw for that new zone with 40R in mind and still reap the benefit of an incentive payment and future building permit payments. and have a stronger sense of what you would like that village center to look like.
Thank you.
Carolyn, through the chair. In regards to the financial incentives, I'll lay my cards out on the table. I get a little nervous about the state. We've seen in the past with the CPA funds where we passed this as a town, we're supposed to be, I'm going to guess, 50% match or some type of substantial match. Do we have any data on how they are funding? Are they funding it fully at 100%? I know we have, when the economy bottoms out, or look at right now what's happening with our state budget, it's tight. Does this take the hit? Are there guarantees in there? And how much local control do we have versus how much we lose if we go with 40R?
Right.
Sorry, a lot of stuff.
Oh, you're fine. I think I'm trying to recall. I don't have my notes in front of me. From my conversation with the state representatives from EOHLC last week, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe they stated that they've had some issues with the incentive payments, but I believe they're consistently 80% of that money is going out. I believe it is susceptible to the annual budget, unfortunately. We did also investigate more in-depth the school support funding. That program, communities are required to apply for those additional funds. To date, only 2 communities across the Commonwealth have applied for those funds. They've consistently received part of their due funding, but I don't believe they've gotten a full 100% of what's been promised under the law.
Carol, what are some of the other communities doing besides 40R?
In terms of just
Addressing a situation like we're trying to address in East Long Meadow.
Okay. I would say in terms of addressing housing specifically, most communities in the valley have adopted some housing production plan that grants a 5-year strategy and benchmarks for increased housing production. Having a housing production plan adopted by the community and approved by the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities does prevent any 40B developments from bypassing the planning board's authority and going straight to the ZBL Zoning Board of Appeals. So that's one strategy when it comes to housing. In terms of communities in the Pioneer Valley addressing mixed use or infill development, there's not a lot of momentum underway.
For everybody's education, including mine, which just elaborate on what 40B allows?
Right. So 40B refers to a statewide affordable housing benchmark or goal, 10% across the Commonwealth. And so the hope is that each community takes on the similar priority of having 10% of their housing stock capital A affordable, which means that 80% area median income that we showed in a previous slide right there. So if a community does not meet that threshold in their subsidized housing inventory, if they're below 10%, a developer can approach the community bypassing the planning board and take a comprehensive application straight to the Zoning Board of Appeals. showing that they have affordable housing units in their development and they can proceed with minimal input and oversight.
And East Long Meadow is currently at, I believe it's about 7%.
Yeah.
So under that 10% threshold.
And currently, there is not a housing production plan on the books for East Long Meadow. So affordable housing developer could come forward and ignore the planning board, go right to the ZBA and have a full comprehensive application that really they don't have much to argue against.
So,
Thank you.
so basically what you're saying, if in my limited understanding, is they want to put more people in one place. Apartments that would be in the center of Springfield, so in other areas. In other words, they want to concentrate people in one area base. That's what I'm picking up.
I don't believe that's what I was trying to express. I was just trying to clarify that.
We're talking about density all the time, density.
Yep.
So it just doesn't make any sense to, and if we don't do this, then therefore they're going to bypass the planning board here, correct? And do what they want to do. If it configures to what the state wants. Correct?
When it comes to affordable housing, there is the possibility there with East Long Meadow not having a housing production plan on the books.
Yeah.
That a developer could come forward and propose more affordable housing, but that development would have to adhere to the base zoning. So it's not necessarily that they would be able to create that much density, but it would be very often it comes across as some type of apartment complex.
Thank you.
Again, though, to clarify, that's just through the 40B process. That's unrelated to 40R.
That's a current option.
And
Yes.
again, if I may, yes, through the chair, if I can help clarify. So the state's 40B process requires every community in the Commonwealth to reach a minimum of 10% affordable housing. And if you're under that 10%, you're vulnerable to developers coming in and citing affordable units wherever they want. And with a 40R process, we're creating an intentional plan, along with the housing production plan. We're creating an intentional plan for where we want to create affordable and diverse housing units in terms of density, affordability, and housing type. So single duplexes, 4 families, townhouses, et cetera. So through this process, we actually maintain control about where and what type of housing we want to see. And then we're also moving ourselves closer to that 10% benchmark so that we're not vulnerable to outside influences.
Who controls the charge for those places? In other words, what's the rent going to be? Who decides that?
So if you look in the green bar on top, the 40R zone is looking to create some diversity of affordable housing options, and affordability is dictated at 80% the area median income, meaning if you're an individual, if you're making $61,000 as an individual, you qualify for affordable housing. If you're a family of 4 and your household income is $87,000, you qualify for affordable housing. So these are not subsidized housing units whatsoever. This is affordable housing so that regular middle-class folks that are working can make sure that they're spending 30% or less of their income on their housing costs, housing and related costs, as opposed to 30% or more.
The chair.
Ralph, yeah.
Carolyn. So
Question in the back.
curious, there's 351 communities. How many have 10% or more of affordable housing?
Your question.
The question is, out of the 351 municipalities in the Commonwealth, how many have hit the 10% threshold of affordable housing units? I don't have that number off the top of my head. I would say that it's
7.
If it's 50%, I'd be surprised.
So the last time I looked of all the communities that had reached it, it was 7.
7?
7 communities,
More
which
than-
means most places are susceptible to a 40B, of which the town of East Long Meadow has had one.
Right, sure.
Most people would never even identify it or know that it was a 40B because the units have to be done in such a way that you can't identify one from the other.
Right.
We're saying again.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Greg.
Just to clarify on the 40R, the incentive is the money, right? Is that the only incentive for 40R?
Can you walk up front? Because I can't.
I don't know.
Come on out.
Is that the only incentive to the 40R is the monetary, the money?
Sure. Yeah, that's the direct incentive. Yeah.
So if we were to commit to 20 units, then we would get a one-time payment of 10,000 for committing, just for an example.
Mhm.
And then 3,000 per unit. So it would be 30, 60,000 and another 10, 70,000 if we committed to 20. If we committed to 50 units, 75,000 up front, 3,000 for the 50, 150, $225,000. The money doesn't seem like a lot of money to commit to these strict guidelines. We have some very successful 55 plus developments in the town. Carlson building potentially could be a 55 plus development. And so I would just worry that for 225, I don't know how many you're thinking. Do you have a projected?
No.
How many even?
No.
But a lot of the other surrounding towns are 20, 40, 50. So if we look at something like that, I mean, a total of $225,000 is peanuts relatively to for all those restrictions. I think I agree with the concept of what we're trying to do, but it seems like the money's not really that good.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair.
Yeah.
These numbers, these values have not changed since 2004 when the law was passed.
It's really not much of a carrot. So we should be able to do, I think we should develop what we're looking to accomplish and do it and not necessarily abide by these rules. And you see towns that don't go 8 years, 10 years without development, but they're stuck with the rules, right? And so, I don't know, that's how I see it. Thank you. Quick follow-up to that.
Go ahead.
You
I have a,
Oh,
And we should be asking people
Sorry,
to say their name and address.
yes, if you could please, when you come up to respond, if you could state your name and address.
Jim Lyden, 40 Senecal Place. Does the acceptance of the money compromise the town in the future anyway? Looking what the town of Milton's going through in terms of the state kind of trying to force them into new zoning requirements because they're part of that new transit around the MBTA line. But they're also now in trying to get them into compliance to submit to them with a new zoning. They're saying, we're going to take away your housing money. So does this in any way kind of compromise us potentially in the future of submitting to the state in other ways of money that we're getting? Or what we're getting?
So I wouldn't see it that way. I don't foresee a possibility. It's a unique circumstance with the MBTA communities,
Springfield's
especially.
be rail, and if Springfield's ever considered to be part of the MBTA, and it's not just if you're on the MBTA line, but surrounding communities, we could theoretically be on a transit line to Boston.
Right. I don't.
And that's the kind of situation Milton found itself, the position they found themselves in, because they started accepting housing money way back, and then the state then passes the transportation law, and now they're stuck in a situation where they want more denser housing in Milton, and now Milton's being sued by the state to submit to it. So, I mean, I'm just kind of against just taking money for the sake of taking money because money is never for free. At some point in time, the state can come knocking saying, we're going to take it away from you.
Right. To my knowledge, no 40R funding has been reclaimed from this Commonwealth. Other than that, I don't necessarily have an answer.
One other question in regards to 40R versus 40B. 40B, is that strictly subsidized housing in terms of the 10% requirement or affordable housing?
No, it's affordable.
Affordable.
It's that 80% area median income.
And then to the 40R, there's a 20% requirement.
For affordable.
For affordable, but with 40B, there's a 10% requirement.
Yes.
No.
I'm sorry.
No. Well, because
40B
40B is 10% of the total housing stock in the community.
That's my question. Is it
40R?
Are we doubling? Would we be?
No. 40R it would be 20% of the housing created within the district, which is a very small percentage of the town's area.
Right.
So,
Okay.
and housing stock.
That was it.
And the district cannot exceed 25% of the total area of a community.
Gotcha.
So you can't make a town-wide 40R district.
Even if you wanted to.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I answer the question.
If you could come forward.
100%. Good type.
At least just ask a record from the.
Well, he wants you. He needs you in front of the camera, sir.
Okay.
I also need you to be closer to the microphone. People here can hear you, but the people on TV can't hear you.
Can you stand next to,
Right here.
So my question is, does anybody have an idea of 40 acres possibly to be developed? What would be the population that would reside within that 40 acres? You must have some idea. Some estimate. 600 people?
If you want. So I'm assuming you're talking about a project that one, the zone hasn't been changed for the mixed use village, which is the 40 acres, which is a bylaw that we created.
That's where we are, right? I mean,
No.
It's kind of like a done deal, isn't it?
No, actually. So completely different. So,
Well, I'm going with the multi-use,
yeah,
and it doesn't have to be 40R. It can be no 40R, but we are moving towards a multi-use district. So typically you would have an idea of how many people would reside within 40 acres. If it was 400 acres, you would have an idea. So what are we talking about? How many people?
so if we do a center town district, that has nothing to do with 40 acres. It depends on what we put for parameters for a center town district. The 40 acres that you're talking about was a mixed use village district with the thought of 330 Chestnut Street in mind as a 40 acre parcel. On that 40 acre parcel, I believe they had asked for 800 roughly units on that parcel for 40 acres.
So you're talking.
That's what they had asked for.
2 people per unit, perhaps?
I wish I had the bylaw in front of me because that was their initial request. We came down from there a lot because we thought that was excessive.
So would there be a great amount of children? I would think maybe 10%, 20% of that number would be children. Wouldn't they be going to school when we have to hire a teacher? I mean, I'm not against development as long as it's reasonable, makes sense for the town. And, affordable housing, I think we need housing. We need housing in the state. So I'm not against that either. It's just, I have a thing about overpopulation, putting too much into things. And all of a sudden it seems, when I think of high density, I think of like, wow, crowded.
I agree.
So I think it would be nice to have an estimate. And my other question, sirs, Adams, if assuming this is so the planning board approves it, then the town council approves the multi-use?
A center district, a zone change or an overlay would have to do, both the planning board would have to approve and the town council after public hearings.
And you would hope that there be only one developer?
it's not, sorry, I don't want to speak.
No,
out of-
I'm confused. So
So what this process is looking to do is create a center town district that uses the smart growth principles that were outlined. And this may happen through a 40R overlay zone, or it may happen through, as several members had noted, just changing the underlying use. And then you're creating the opportunity for different types of development to come in. Zoning is always about the future and what you want the future of an area to look like. So right now, if you look at that map, we have a lot of like industrial uses at the center of town. Those are, sort of relics of the past. If you want to move forward, do you want to continue to have industrial uses at the center of town, or do you want to have something that feels like a walkable community core that has a mix of residential and commercial units that feels a little bit more like a town center or like a
Right,
traditional New England center.
But, we've been talking about housing a lot. And to me, the center district, I understand it seems to be separate from the housing area, right?
Housing is one component.
Right,
of a
and then we're
center town
talking about apartments. When I think about apartments, I think about 4, 5, 6-story buildings.
So all of these design standards, can you go back to that slide?
The missing middle slide, is that what
We're
you're
gonna get out of here.
The slide about
Very good
the,
question.
go back one more about the components, one more back,
components?
more back, sorry.
It's okay.
I think.
Tell me,
I saw it.
these are the components. Was it this slide?
No,
And standards?
yes, the design standard. So the thing, so when we're crafting the bylaw that outlines the center town district, 40R requires us to create standards for building height, what the streets and sidewalks are going to look like in terms of
And that will
what
be
you want.
within the bylaws?
We get to
Yes.
create it. Nothing is written. Everything is going to be crafted through community participation. So we can't say today, there's going to be this many housing units on this parcel. It's really going to be outlined and determined and dictated by the community. And these are the different pieces that you get to sort of turn the volume up or down on. How high do you want your buildings to be? How wide do you want your streets to be? How wide do you want the sidewalks to be? Do you want pitched roofs on all these buildings? Do you want there to be, this
So-
much landscaping or
So
buffer?
the steering committee would recommend that to the planning board. The planning board would approve it, and then the town council would approve it.
And there's public hearings in each of those separate processes.
And then let's say there will be a developer that comes in. The planning board will still get to look at that
Yes,
and still will have some ability to shape or
yes.
recommend
And condition,
or deny.
absolutely.
And would the town council have oversight on the planning board? Would it just be up to the planning board?
So the town council has oversight over the bylaw. Once the bylaw is created, it becomes a by right use for the planning board to review all applications and serve as the permitting authority. So in the same way that they have been hearing, very interesting projects such as the different subdivisions that are created in town or the warehouse project that was recently proposed, they get to hear that, allow the public a role in the participation of giving feedback. And then the planning board alone gives it a thumbs up or a thumbs down and then creates conditions for what that's actually going to look like in reality.
And can the bylaws be revised?
Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
hope.
Town council with planning board review.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
No,
Thank you.
there-
Thank you. Questions.
Because it is, it's an involved process and we really hope that there's a lot learned and along the way. And then through that learning, you're able to use those ideas to shape the process. There were other members of the community or?
Are there any other questions? Any questions from the audience?
Can we,
Name and address for the record.
Robert Dobek, 67 years in this town.
Microphone's up here.
Okay, Robert Dobek, 67 years in this town. It's a great town. When you get the state involved, I get a little worried, a little bit, Can we do this on our own without the state? What we're talking about? We can. So that's my question.
Okay.
Get the state involved, I'm telling you. Or the government, too much, they want to control. No, if we can do it ourselves, I'll give all the time because I don't know what he's talking about. Density, this and that. It's smart. He's got these fancy titles to all this. Then he puts up apartments like, I'm just a pharmacist that was doing pills for him. Making people well, but this stuff. This town is a beautiful town. You got to be careful how you structure it forward. Otherwise, you're going to have a trouble. Because some people aren't going to, they're going to, I'm sorry.
And I'll just add that whether or not we adopt 40R as an overlay zone, this is going to be the same process to review the creation of a center town district.
Sure.
And this process may land in a place where we create a center town district that does not have a 40R overlay zone. We'll see. It's about imagining and creating the conditions for the future that we want to see.
Sir, do you want to come up?
Oh, that's you.
Thank you.
Name and address for the record.
Bill LaRosa, 61 Hartwich Road. What is a center town district? We're developed already. What do you want to do? What are you proposing?
Not me. It is up to the community. It is absolutely up to the community.
The community's already done what they want to do or developed. How old is our town, Ralph? 125 years? 150?
It's over 125.
And it all started in the center and grew out. And that's what, now you want to reshape the center, which has 7 streets coming into it. All those other communities you showed, Marblehead particularly, do any of them have a rotary with 7 streets coming into it? No, I can answer it. I've been to all of them. None. This is unique. This is different. We can't apply state mandates to it. Whatever the incentive is to the town, it is not worth it to us. It's not worth it to us. We live in a town. We don't want to live in a city.
So if I can answer that. So we had a conversation previously on this, and just to set standards on this, I equally love this town, right? And we're not looking to change anything drastically. I think the points that we're forgetting, not to call out any properties, but I mean, think of what behind Dunkin' Donuts looks like. Think of the Carlin building.
Wait a minute.
That's another.
That for a second.
Let me finish. That's another industrial zone property, right? That can be developed. You want to put a warehouse there? You absolutely can. It's zoned. It's the zoning things that are concerning to us. So what our hope is, if you've driven around, look at Long Meadow Shops, for example.
We're not in Long Meadow, though.
We're not. Absolutely, we're not.
We're
but if you can clean up some of the properties and make it a walkability where you have the rail trail and have some nice properties with small businesses that can come into there, that's our goal, is to clean up some of those. Look at the Romalitos building.
Excuse me for a second. Rail trail going north would be dangerous. Rail trail going north would be dangerous. Dangerous.
That's fine. And we're not talking rail trail. I'm talking.
Well, we were talking about it before and you just repeated rail trail.
From the rail trail, where you can currently walk today. If you look here, all these industrial properties can become, I'll say it because it's a buzzword, another warehouse.
Yeah,
Carlin goal was.
That's
and if you look on here, you say those properties, there's nothing to develop. Behind Rockies, there's a parking lot, there's wooded
and there's
area.
Water back there too.
Yeah, but that all can be developed. And that is all zoned to be anything you want. The goal, what we're trying to do is put small business retail. There's some beautiful shops down there now. It would be nice to bring that walkability area up, not looking to congest the circle or anything. That is what we're trying to reach. So there is plenty of properties that go unnoticed. You can see on the GIS map. It's incredible. So that's what we're looking for. That's all.
Okay.
That's my best attempt.
And maybe we should have like one more comment and move on in the agenda.
Yes.
Yes.
Dan Burak, 57 Summer Road.
No, he's good. He's good? Okay, just making sure.
Thank you. I want to echo what Mr. LaRosa said. Yeah, this town has been developed. Everything is built out. You're going to have spot areas where you have a underdeveloped small little piece, but it's little spot areas. It's not a big, let's go from the Long Meadow line to Chestnut Street and all the way around. There's very limited real developable property. Mr. Graham has a great, beautiful property right in the center of town. We've got the Carlin building. So we've got that one little section that could be nicely developed, but he's the owner and he's going to do what is best for him. I'm a real estate investor too. And, you know, to put restrictions, say, well, this is what you can do. This is what you can't do. And you're going to have a whole overlay district from, again, one side of town to the other. As far as the residential, I mean, first of all, I'd like to know where all this vacant usable land is, because as an investor, I'll buy it. It's you know, it's nothing there. It's wetlands. You know, the other thing you have to take in consideration, which you haven't, is the parking. Parking restrictions, parking requirements are major. It takes up a small, you can build on 25% of the lot usually. And the rest you have to have a parking lot. It's all asphalt, so it's not going to be beautiful little property like you're showing in Northampton. They have a parking problem. They have parking garages because they need to have a place to park these people. I mean, this is just ludicrous. You know, to try and redevelop this whole economy from out of the center, all the property. As far as, you know, houses, any developer today would buy any good piece of land that they could buy to build on, especially in the last 10 years with interest rates being so low and the building that goes on. The other thing I have to take into consideration is the cost per square foot to build these things. The cost is just going astronomical. How do you have affordable property when you have to buy the land, you have to build this expensive property, and it's new construction? It's not an older piece of property that is like classified as C property as opposed to anything new is going to be an A property. Right? This is just, like I said, ludicrous. You know, people, if you have a dilapidated house in a neighborhood, you have flippers today. I've flipped several properties in East Long Meadow, taken them and fixed them up, completely renovated them and resold them for profit. I mean, so I just think this whole thing is ludicrous. We have to look at the problems we've got, which is Chestnut Street, and decide what we want to do there, and just let the rest of it go. I mean,
Okay. Yes.
Just a small piece.
Yes.
So I'm Greg Thompson on the school committee. Just to mention, in the center of town, we have 2 existing softball fields. And I know it was mentioned at the planning board meeting to maintain open space in the center of town. We are putting new softball fields at the new high school. And so potentially to use those fields as fields or playscapes or gazebo, something more park-like, instead of softball fields that are used 2 mornings a week. We will replace those fields in another place. We could even, you know, use part of it for parking. I just want to throw that out there, you know, in your plan, because it was mentioned, and I don't want us to stick with 2 softball fields in the center of town. That's like not very exciting, right? We need some exciting stuff down there. So I just wanted to mention that we have that option out there.
We'll talk about that later, Greg. My softball hat.
Oh, you're the softball. No, it's cool. I was talking around.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we'll talk. Okay. At this point, we're going to move on in our agenda.
Yeah.
Yes. Can I add one thing?
Are you gonna?
I think we're going to move on. We're running on time.
One last. About ball fields. That's a beautiful development there where we could get rid of all the ball fields in the center of town and put these beautiful new buildings up.
Along with the Graham property, right? Which dovetail right into it. Perfect. You can walk around.
Next order of business.
Okay.
Mapping exercise.
Okay. Thank you. I apologize for being late. Okay. Do you want to finish running through?
So the next order of business is the mapping exercise for the Centertown district delineation. So Rebecca, and then we have different diagrams up. Do you want to explain how it's?
I think you should explain it. I just want to move myself out of the way so people can come up.
Well, my first question would be for the chair and the steering committee. This exercise is more for the sake of progressing work towards a 40R application. Would the steering committee like to go through this exercise and take another step towards that application process? Or pause for now?
Well, I think you ought to explain what we have up here on the board.
Absolutely.
And that decision is not to be made tonight, whether we.
That's fair.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't think we can make a decision one way or the other tonight.
Yeah.
All right. So just to explain what is on the wall, we provided 5 alternative preliminary districts. So these are just concepts. There's nothing written in stone or anything like that. So looking at that, the 1 mile radius around the Rotary, looking at existing use patterns and thinking about some of the goals of a 40R smart growth district. We came up with 5 alternatives to start thinking about what makes sense. Of course, within the bold black line would be the tentative town center district, which could be 40R, it could not be. But it was more of an exercise, particularly for the 40R application, where we have to start doing parcel by parcel analysis. We recognize that there has to be a starting point, and we needed some guidance from the steering committee. So we were going to ask for a simple just gallery walk for you all to stand, observe, provide notes via sticky notes, pros, cons for each, or if the committee is quick and you're all in a consensus that one really identifies what you think is town center, that just speeds up the process.
Yeah, and the intention was, and this doesn't need to be what actually happens tonight, of course, but was to, after reviewing those, if none of them really seemed to fit, or there are elements of them that seemed to fit and others that didn't, was to take a version of that that doesn't have a boundary on it at all and review that and start to consider what the preferred boundary might look like, if that was the path that the committee wished to take.
Is there any, what is the rationale for the 5 boundaries that are up there? Real quick.
Go through?
So sure,
we can. There is rationality. So from an outside perspective, looking at alternative 1, while it's mostly north-south, it is strictly the currently used commercial, office, industrial zones with some civic properties included. The rationale for that one was to minimize impact on existing residential parcels. It was to anticipate an expansion of the rail trail, but also to centralize that amenity in a mixed-use district. I think that's about it.
Yeah, I think that pretty much covers it.
Kind of summarizes it.
Number 2 is really just in a way, it's a more confined version of alternative 1. So it's clearly a smaller area, potentially mapping more closely to what folks often consider to be the downtown. Again, these were just proposals to get you all thinking. So there's that was the intention here, rather than to be extremely precise. That was not our goal. So really just different, shapes to play with. But that was essentially the idea behind alternative 2.
Alternative 3 was formed off of some of the comments I've heard from steering committee members thinking about town center from one school property to the next. So it widens out to abut both the high school property and the middle school property. So it's a bit more expansive, and the Rotary is central in that district.
For alternative 4, the key difference here, I suppose, between 1 and 2 in particular is just that it incorporates that mixed use parcel the parcel that was identified with the creation of the existing now mixed use village bylaw that's on the book. So it just really incorporates that and make sure that it's part of the boundary, and that's really the key difference. Otherwise, it's fairly similar. Again, focusing almost exclusively on parcels that are currently being used for commercial and industrial uses and underutilized parcels.
And alternative 5 was kind of a curveball, because through 40R you can have sub-districts for your smart growth overlay. So that was exploring the idea of creating a village-centered smart growth district between the school properties and around the Rotary, but also including a secondary district on the northwest side of town close to where you already have kind of a natural mixing of uses with commercial and residential densely developed.
Can you state again what the value of moving through a like preliminary delineation process is for the future work that we do?
So future work, particularly when it comes to a 40R process where we are required to analyze an impact of changing densities. By delineating the district, we can then start to look at parcels by size, and we can start to see, what minimum density actually would fit. We can start to play with those numbers. If multifamily is allowed, and we start to think about 3 units per acre, or how that breaks down. We kind of need to know the bounds of the district so we can start to look through all those parcels in turn.
But then I'll just add, even if 40R isn't the path forward, it still can be useful to just consider what if there wasn't steering committee wants to move forward with just an overlay district that wasn't necessarily 40R but included the sort of ideas for mixed use with commercial and residential. What could that area look like? Where would it make sense as a district? So even without 40R, for 40R, there's a very specific reason that relates to the analysis that has to be done. But even without 40R, it would be a valuable process just for defining what is downtown and where would it make sense to have this kind of district. So.
Okay. So at this time, does this moving forward, you want us to take a closer look and give you notes?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Carolyn, can I just real quick? I was looking at number 5. Is there a certain minimum size to do a center district? And is that the reason why we went to the north end? So it's basically like 2 separate areas.
No.
So in other words, under 40R or whatever, it can be as large or as small.
No. So,
or does it have to be X number of units in order to go under that?
Right. So under 40R specifically, the total area of the district cannot exceed or be greater than 25% of the total area of the municipality.
Right.
Can
it be less?
It can be much less. EOHLC has changed their approach. Very early in the history of 40R, they would allow like 1 or 2 parcel size districts. They avoid that, to my understanding. Recently, they want to see a larger area considered.
South Hadley just do one which was limited to basically like their green area in the center of South Hadley.
South Hadley's, I think, it's more than just 1 parcel though.
Okay.
Yeah, it's small.
Yeah.
And it's got a weird shape to it. It's got like an hourglass shape.
Yep.
But it's much more than 1 parcel.
Yeah.
And whenever they see like 1 giant parcel, they tend to avoid that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
So yeah. Happy. Here are some tools. Feel free to stand up, stretch your legs. You're interested.
Here are, you've got 6 months.
Thank you.
I'm going to hand these out. Please.
You don't understand.
Oh, you got one.
Yeah.
I've got bags.
As many as you need.
Business sense.
Yeah.
Feel free to leave a note on
You could like that all under one of the stuff.
Great. Your exit.
These right here. Yeah.
I didn't just note.
I have some of the pink ones.
Just.
You can get up and get rid of it.
Yeah.
Sure. I'm sorry. Oh no.
Spread mulch out there.
I have to tell you, I had so many notes for you, but I tried to keep them limited.
Whichever one you like.
Well,
I can do it now. How do you spell none? Nothing. Yeah. This must be brutal for you at night to come out to meetings like this.
After a full day of thinking about this and how it could go wrong and then watching it, yeah, it's usually, I don't know if it is miserable.
Enough meetings, you really, that's about what I was expecting.
That's right.
Whatever.
Coming with me.
End up, I think.
You wanna know something funny? If you look at the available, our land is on there. My driveway. Developed with my driveway.
Fun exercise.
Beyond what's required under the 40R?
Just zoom around.
So they could,
They're separate.
I was trying to,
they,
no idea.
Okay, so we're going to wrap up, right? That's, we've completed, sorry, I'm so disjointed right now.
Mapping exercise.
Okay, we're completing the mapping exercise for center town district delineation. And so we have the planning for public engagement at May 20 event under new business.
So I think we should consider what kind of components we want to include at the May 20th event to engage the community in this process. I think at least as far as what would be most expeditious would be a process that includes some small group charrettes, where there could be a lot more interactive discussion around these different components. And I think it'll give the people that are participating a better opportunity to understand the different variables that are at play and just, be creative, and then they can share out through those small groups. And I don't know if there's other pieces that you think are important, because we are anticipating even larger turnout for that event, hopefully. I would expect that we'd like to create some sort of standard ground rules for how small groups are going to engage with one another, how they're going to interface with the information and with the committee so that things are kept civil and productive. I don't know if there's other components or pieces that you all want to include moving forward. PVPC, I don't know if you have best practices to suggest for this next process.
didn't come with any best practices in mind, because we were waiting to see what the steering committee was, if you all had discussed anything. I think at the top of my mind right now is, do you foresee a map product needed for this first community event? Are you going to want us to integrate your feedback and come with a new alternative?
I think that you definitely should take the comments that were received tonight, both from us and the audience, and the mapping exercise that we just did, and perhaps present something that summarizes that. But I think it's also extremely important that the public know that this is a process that is evolving and not decided. I think that's extremely important to get across at the next meeting. Not so sure we did a good job tonight getting that across.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I would suggest that selecting one of the 5 maps tonight might, at our next event for the public, bring the focus all to debate on that map rather than some of these other important issues.
Yeah, I would agree that picking a map would be, I feel like that's a little premature at this point. there's a lot of other information that needs to be talked about and information that the community needs to know before settling on a map.
For future public engagement, can we request of PVPC's data or metrics or other kinds of charts even that we can have on hand to use in engaging the public?
Yeah.
I'm thinking of things like, I don't know, resident data on residents, data on traffic or parking, or perhaps other things that we would request specifically, not to just ask you for all data, but
that'd be a lot of information. Any other thoughts? Okay.
Yeah, I'm just going to say, I feel a little lost in the process, to be honest with you. I know we started with 40R, and then we were talking about center district. I think one of the things might be that we decide what our goal is, and obviously we need the public input. So I don't think it's a bad thing to have more public input at all, but the timeline is fast if we go with 40R. But I think maybe the goal next time should be get as much data as we can and try and figure out which path we're going to go, just so that we can be a little more clear. Because right now, honestly, I have an idea of where we're going in my head, where I'd like to go, but it's still fuzzy when I look at all of these and what exactly are we looking at and what exactly is our goal going to be, because it seems to be fuzzy in my mind. And I'm probably clear as mud right now, but
makes perfect sense.
You mind?
Yes, go ahead.
Tom Christensen, 135 Sanford Street. No, I guess I'll echo both of those comments, because I think everybody came in here today sort of, I don't want to use the word accusatory, but thinking we already made all these grand decisions on what we were doing. And this is your first meeting. And so it should be fuzzy. And the community should have questions. They don't know yet what we want to do. That's in fact why we invited them and why we're inviting them in May. So whatever product we do churn out, when it does come into clarity, will be what they want and what you want. And I think that's okay. Sometimes I think when you have the public engagement, just having been through the high school thing, you kind of feel a little negative when you leave, but it's all good, right? Like everybody's giving you that opinion of what they want to see and what they don't want to see. And that's all right. It is a process. And if I could say one thing, the timeline thing, I think even though it should guide us a little, we shouldn't make any decisions based on a timeline, like rushing a decision or something like that. So I guess at least I think I'm fine with you being patient and making sure you ask all the questions and get all the feedback you want before we even think about getting unfuzzy. You know what I mean? Let's lay it all out there and let the people tell us what they want. That's what I think. But excellent job, because I think it did get a little volatile, to say the least. But and that's okay. Everybody's passionate about their town, just like we are. That's why we're all here. So all input is good input, and I thought it went well. So thank you, appreciate it.
Yeah, for that. And then we do these.
Don Mackey, 12 Colony Drive. I think that's the first time I've ever had that.
Please stand close to the microphone.
And I guess I've thrown some input here and there over the years. But one suggestion I think that I would have for the committee would be to think about the sort of parameters or the guidelines that you might follow. Just sort of jot down some ways for you to navigate how to make the decision whether we steer toward 40R or steer toward doing the center town district first and then possibly with a goal or an idea following on. Because I think my read of what people felt tonight was, I mean, certainly there was a sense of the sentiment in the room. Whether that is what the steering committee feels is in the best interest of the town is another question. But I think to approach the next meeting, to be able to articulate some sort of criteria by which that decision will be made, not to make that decision, but to be able to articulate, look, we're going to take these 5 criteria, these 5 parameters as a way to decide, well, does that make sense to follow the 40R? The timeline is a huge issue. Can you actually accomplish what you want in that timeline and get the product and the bylaw that you think is going to work best for the town in that timeline? That's a real question. So how do you then look at that more closely and weigh some of the comments that people are going to make and some of the concerns that come up and add that to a judgment as together you and the citizens say, yeah, actually, maybe 40R is the way to go. We should sort of push this or not. So rather than think about being fuzzy and clearing it up in terms of how much closer am I to the end product of a bylaw, is really what sorts of analyses, how many ways do you have to decide which way to go in terms of deciding 40R or not 40R? Basically, you're just replicating this process, but with how do we proceed? How do we talk about this? Because otherwise, it's just this sort of random, nonstop back and forth conversation of people saying, oh, and here's another thing. And everything ends up sort of having equal weight. Every comment suddenly influences which way you go. And if you don't have criteria to navigate through that, you're going to be fuzzy after the 3rd meeting. So that would just be sort of how I would approach what this committee's role could be. That might be more productive and make the interaction with the public, because then you're in a position to answer questions more clearly. You sort of have a framework, and you're saying, well, here's the framework, and you just have something to measure against. That's all. So that's sort of what I took away from tonight, and where I think in terms of you guys approaching how to get to the next 20th. Fair? All right.
Excellent.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay. Are there any closing remarks or questions? No? Okay. We're going to move on to old business. Ice Cream Social meet the steering committee event May 8th from 4 to 6 p.m. at Graham Central Station. And then I have working documents, ground rules for public engagement, and review website mockup. Okay. Other business, deputy town manager's report. Anything?
I think I gave my report early on in the introduction of the committee.
Okay.
I'll be at the Ice Cream Social and there to participate in meeting the community. I'm looking forward to meeting and talking with community members more. And I will also serve as a conduit between the committee and PVPC in terms of helping to create that agenda for the 20th. So anything else you want to add that hasn't been stated here, you can reach out to me about that.
Okay.
Will PVPC be at the Ice Cream Social?
The 8th. We can see if I can make it.
Is it important that they be there or not be there?
No, I really think it's an opportunity for the steering committee to mix and mingle Yeah. If PVPC wants to attend and get some ice cream, awesome. But they are not on the agenda.
Okay. So is this a very casual and we're just talking and asking people, or they're telling us what they're seeing and pros and cons and not structured?
Not structured, at least the way that I'm envisioning it. And again, with your feedback, it's an opportunity for the folks in the community to get to know who's making the decisions moving forward. So I would imagine there'd be some time for people to sort of come in and settle in and grab their ice cream. And then we could do a rundown of who everybody is, what they do in town, why they decided to volunteer for this position. And then you just break up and, what flavor ice cream did you have? What brought you to this event? And really just starting to engage the community. And the other nice thing about this event being on Steve's property at Graham Central Station is that it is in each of these maps. And so you could get a sense for what standing and walking around in downtown and eating an ice cream or, participating in community life downtown might feel like.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah. Regarding the May 20th meeting, can we as a group do any planning? I'm thinking of like open meeting considerations there, because I tend to agree with the sentiment that some good organization and preparation before that meeting could really help, especially with public engagement at that one. But that's not too far away.
So what you can do, because you are governed by open meeting law, you can't have a quorum. So 3 people cannot deliberate on matters of topic here. So if you wanted to create a working group of 2, along with me, we can work to create alongside of PVPC the agenda and what that process is going to look like. We can't have a third. We could have 2 people create a working group along with me and PVPC. Are you volunteering?
I'll create a motion to create a working group.
Do you want a second? All right. Sounds like we're going to create a working group.
Who's going to populate that working group?
Yeah, we need to find out who would like to be a part of that.
I'll join.
Steve? Okay.
Yeah, I'll since it was my idea, I'll
Okay.
be willing to be considered to be joined.
Okay.
Motion to nominate.
A motion to nominate.
Creating one before they nominate the people.
You're right. They didn't actually vote.
They didn't actually nominate.
Yeah. So need to take a vote to create a, what did you call it? Working group. Thank you. I'm still jet lagged. I apologize. Individual votes. Ayes.
Ayes.
Aye. Nays. No. Okay. All right. That passes. Okay. Abstains.
We're just
they just get to sit. Okay, so
nominate.
Motions to nominate for the working group.
Stephen Jason.
Stephen Jason. Is there a second?
Second. All in favor?
Second.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay. Any other discussion?
Carolyn?
Yes.
May I? So I'm just curious at the social, are we going to have a specialty ice cream like a Center Town District Sunday? Just thinking, hey.
It's a bit.
I'll let you think about it, okay?
Under 3 stories.
we have a motion.
We have a flavor card, Graham Central Station. So we'll.
All right, flavor card. Ralph's going to go put a flavor card in. All right. With that, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
Second.
All right. With that, we are adjourned.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.